Corpus Christi has been careening toward a water emergency, but it's not the only city along the Gulf with water woes. The latest today on the Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm Laura Rice. Another court battle over hemp. This time, what stores can sell during a longer legal tie-up is at stake. We'll explain. The United Arab Emirates is leaving the world's most powerful oil cartel. What's that mean for OPEC and the prices we pay? Plus, new rules for autonomous vehicles are now in effect in Texas, but some experts want to see more. And commentator W.F. Strong has a story about a man who wanted to build a business in Texas and ended up with a global brand. That and more today on the Texas Standard. There's a potential for severe weather again in North and East Texas a day after storms ripped off roofs in mineral wells and sent 2 people to the hospital. It's the Texas Standard for Wednesday, April 29th. I'm Laura Rice. A rainy April has been enough to lift a big swath of the middle part of Texas out of an abnormally dry stage, but more than 3/4 of the state is still in some stage of drought. If there's one part of Texas especially focused on praying for rain, it's Corpus Christi. We've been following that city's growing water crisis for weeks now, and the potential for this major American city running out of water seems hard to overstate. In fact, the latest reporting from Inside Climate News and the Texas Newsroom characterizes it as a growing likelihood of an unprecedented disaster. For this month's edition of The Drill Down, our reporting project highlighting investigative journalism, we're joined by 2 of those reporters committing to long-term coverage of the ongoing water crisis in Corpus Christi and South Texas. Dylan Badur is a reporter for Inside Climate News. Dylan, welcome back.
Thanks, Laura.
And Nina Satija is an investigative journalist and editor for the Texas Newsroom. Nina, glad to have you here in the Texas Standard Studios.
Good to be here.
Well, Nina, you're brand new to this role. You have a lot of issues you could cover, but you are going to partner on this water issue. Why do you think this is one of the most important issues in the state right now?
Corpus Christi is Texas's 8th largest city. So we're talking about 300,000 people. And I believe the city then provides water to another 200,000 people. So I think this is just an important story about human lives and humanity and the future of it, number one. And then Corpus Christi is also a major industrial hub, major petrochemical complex, if you will. It's got a number of huge companies, energy giants, ExxonMobil, Valero, Occidental. So to see this city in this situation, I think is absolutely a national and an international story. And I think if they really have to go to these major water restrictions that they're now saying will have to happen in September, I think it will be felt beyond Corpus Christi and possibly beyond Texas as well.
Well, Dylan, you're well known to our listeners for having brought the Corpus Christi water crisis really into the spotlight. Your reporting has prompted action on the local and state levels. Tell us more about this partnership with Nina and the Texas Newsroom, our partners at KEDT and Corpus Christi. How will this help you cover this critical issue?
Well, it's going to help a lot. I could not be more excited to have Nina and the Texas Newsroom on the team here and on the story. Everybody knows it's not the best times for the news media industry. We got a lot less reporters in the state than we need. And like you said, for the past few years, I felt a little bit alone on this story, for the media reason, and also because Corpus Christi is in the periphery. It doesn't get a lot of attention. So there are so many stories I've wanted to do that I have not been able to get time to do. And with Nina, I feel we're hitting the ground running. Nina's new to this job maybe, but she's deeply sourced in Texas water from past issues. And that's already come to the forefront in reporting we did just in the last 2 weeks. So we're going to have a lot of stories coming up from this team over the next months and year.
Well, Nina, up until now, many of the headlines about the water crisis have rightly focused on Corpus Christi. Like you said, it's the 8th largest city in Texas. But the article that you just published also talks about communities in the coastal bend issuing disaster declarations in recent weeks, cities and communities relying on Corpus Christi. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, again, just highlights how important this story is for Corpus Christi, but also statewide. I think you have a lot of these little communities that are, in some ways, it almost seems like taking this more seriously, at least from a public standpoint. They are really sounding the alarm publicly in a way that we only just saw some Corpus Christi officials start to do, saying, we don't know how we're going to handle this. And I think, you've also got communities, and Dylan has done amazing coverage of this, who are affected by the enormous amount of groundwater that Corpus Christi is pumping right now to try to get out of this crisis. We're hearing about water with increased salinity. We're hearing about people that have health problems potentially because of this. So again, just a massive story that goes well beyond that city. And I think also, let's talk in the story we did last week for KUT and the Texas Standard. We mentioned that HEB, I think, has their tortilla factory. Their main tortilla factory is in Corpus Christi. So, we're going to see those effects around the state. It's going to affect, I imagine, restaurants and other businesses as well across the state.
Well, Dylan, Nina mentioned salinity. This is a word we use over and over again in talking about the water crisis in Corpus Christi, because the options have been groundwater and seawater. Corpus, right, is right by the Gulf, but both are salty, especially the Gulf, of course. But this groundwater is increasingly so. Can you talk about desalination? There, of course, Corpus Christi itself did not pursue a desalination plant years ago when that was on the table, but a couple of other communities have. Can you talk about Alice?
Sure. Yeah. Alice last year opened up a groundwater desalination plant. So, we have, there's seawater, which we think of as salt water. Groundwater can be about half as salty. So it's not nearly as energy intensive to desalinate, but still very intensive. So Alice opened this sort of cutting edge groundwater treatment plant, but it doesn't belong to Alice. It actually belongs to a private company called Seven Seas, which has a history of developing these kind of plants in the Caribbean. So Alice is on a good footing as far as water supply compared to other towns, but they're now in a situation where they're going to be paying a private company for their water in perpetuity, which is a pretty big change, in how we do things here. And they say that's necessary for several reasons, including because the little town of Alice does not have the technical expertise and know-how to operate what's called a reverse osmosis treatment plant. So while it's good for water supply, it also puts us in a dangerous position where a community is depending on a water supply that it is not able to operate independently. And that's what's happening in Alice, and that's what we're likely going to see happening in lots of these other smaller communities when they, come right up against the edge of scarcity soon.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. Beeville recently issued debt to fund its groundwater desalination project. Would it be in a similar situation?
Well, it might be too late to be issuing debt to fund projects like this, but it also might be possible that some folks can get their act together and build things quickly and kind of rise up to what the moment calls for. But that is a $35 million bond is a lot of debt for Beeville, which is a small city, small town, really. And they issued that last year, and I think it's quickly looking like that will not be sufficient. So the question is, okay, solutions are available for tens of millions of dollars or more, but is that realistically going to be something we can use for small towns like Beeville, or will a water supply really effectively be out of their reach in the new future if it's Corpus goes dry?
Well, we've been talking about the timeline for Corpus Christi to run out of water, and it seems to keep moving up. We were talking about October. Now we're talking about September is when a water emergency would go into effect. And
can I jump in and clarify? That's not when they'll run out of water. That's when they'll institute emergency conservation measures to push. That's when it's becoming ultra serious, basically.
To prevent them from running out of water ultimately.
So let's talk about what happens now and what happens in September then. And I don't think we have clarity on either of those answers, Nina, but what are they saying needs to happen now so that we even will reach that September deadline, but hopefully with more water in the reservoirs, but... Yeah.
It's a really good question, and you're absolutely right. I think they are still working that out. In fact, just yesterday, City Council delayed a key vote. I think they were planning on voting to finalize the proposal for what will happen in September, to finalize those rules for how they will implement a water emergency starting in September. They delayed that vote. So that tells you just how hard it is for them to work through these issues. But also, the time is ticking, the clock is ticking. So they have still not agreed on what the actual restrictions will be that they say will be implemented in September when there is a water emergency, or when they expect there to be a water emergency. So that's probably an issue. We've also, reported that we don't know what industry will do. Supposedly, based on City Council presentation last week, industry would be subject potentially to these 25% cuts, having to cut their water use by 25% as early as September. But there's no real enforcement mechanism the city has on industry. And industry has not said, nor are they required, by law to say what they would do or if they could cut their water use by 25%. So the conversation at City Council last week was still very much focused on things like pools, household use, and, pun intended, that is a drop in the bucket. It was really something to see City Council talk about, the impact of closing pools. I mean, here in Austin, we can imagine if the pools were closed over the summer. So the city's going to keep them open. It is going to limit, or they've said they plan on it, limiting the hours of the pools over the summer, of the city pools. But that's going to hardly even do anything. City council members were pretty upset about that. They noted that there's a problem with gun violence in Corpus Christi, as there are such problems in many cities. And, kids need a safe place to be. So limited pool hours were a concern to them. But I think the hardest thing to hear is, like, even limiting those pool hours is just going to be so negligible in saving water. I did think it left some people scratching their heads as to, why are we doing this when we know that, I think the stat was, throughout the entire summer, pools and splash pads use maybe 1.8 million gallons of water total. Whereas you look at one of the largest, I think it's a plastics plant that's run partially by Exxon in Corpus Christi, that uses up about 13 million gallons a day of water. So we're still not having that conversation about how to deal with that water user, but we're talking about pools.
Yeah, let me just add, just to put clarity, they will save much less water by closing the pools for the entire summer than they would by instituting 25% curtailments on a single refinery for a single day.
Wow. Dylan Badur is a reporter with Inside Climate News. Nina Satija is with the Texas Newsroom. This has been part of our drill down coverage highlighting investigative work from across the state. You can find more at texasstandard.org. Nina, Dylan, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
There's more Texas Standard just ahead. Up next, the legal fight happening during another legal fight over hemp sales in Texas. Stay with us. This is the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. A hearing is underway in Austin that will determine whether smokable hemp products can be legally sold in Texas while a court battle plays out. The hemp industry is suing to block new state regulations that sharply increased fees and effectively ban the sale of cannabis flower and concentrates. KUT's Nathan Bernier is following the 3-day hearing in state court.
Smokable hemp products are back on store shelves for now because of a temporary court order set to expire at the end of the week. But the hemp industry is now trying to extend that partial freeze of the rules while their challenge plays out in court, which could take years. They called to the stand Lauren Bridges. She operates 2 hemp businesses in Longview.
I would say that we couldn't sustain long-term under the new proposed rules.
James Rich is a lawyer with the Texas Attorney General's office. He argued the hemp industry has no jurisdiction to bring a suit.
Sovereign immunity protects the state agencies, and officials from suit and liability, except in very, very limited circumstances.
The hearing is expected to continue through Thursday. A decision on a temporary injunction should come soon after. I'm Nathan Bernier in Austin.
and you are listening to the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. War with Iran has already put global oil markets on edge and offered pain at the pumps for many Texas motorists. Much turns on the future of the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical choke points for energy, now blocked by apparent stalemate between Tehran and Washington. Now comes another jolt. Yesterday, the United Arab Emirates announced it's leaving the world's most powerful oil cartel, OPEC, exposing new cracks inside an organization that's shaped oil prices for decades. The move seemed to come out of the blue. But what does it add up to in practical terms for everyday Texans, not just drivers, but for an industry where crude prices can mean jobs, drilling, exports, and more? Here to help us with that, someone who's literally written the book on energy and geopolitics. Rice University's Jim Crane is the author of Energy Kingdoms, Oil and Political Survival in the Persian Gulf. We caught up with him at an energy conference in Mexico City. Professor, are you surprised by the UAE's announcement?
I was a little bit surprised by the timing because they're not going to get an immediate benefit from quitting OPEC right away because they can't, they can't really increase their oil exports any more than they're at right now. I mean, they're able to export right now about 1.5 to 1.8 million barrels a day because they have a bypass pipeline that goes around the Strait of Hormuz. But with the strait closed, they can't really get any more to market now at all. So seems like an odd time to do this. I suspect the catalyst has more to do with the diplomatic spat with Saudi Arabia.
You anticipated what I was going to ask, because it seems like perhaps this was fine-tuned to create some kind of symbolic damage. And I'm curious if you see this as mainly about geopolitics in Iran or having more to do with UAE's relationship with Saudi Arabia, or if, in fact, the Trump administration might have been trying to persuade the UAE to take this step.
So the UAE is really looking for a lot more freedom of action, I think, in oil markets, over the long term, right? So, short term, we're not going to see a big effect, but long term, the UAE is just a much different country than the rest of OPEC. They're a much wealthier per capita country. They've got a much more diversified economy. They see themselves as a kind of a big player on the global stage. They've just established relations with Israel. They're seeking more influence in Washington. And I think they see that OPEC just kind of holds them back. It holds them back diplomatically and politically, geopolitically, but it's also holding them back economically. I mean, they've been raising their production capacity steadily over the past few years from 3 million barrels a day to 5, and they're almost at 5 million barrels a day now. And OPEC quotas have been keeping an ever greater share of their production capacity offline, and it's just costing them billions and billions of dollars. So it's been in the cards for a long time, this move. It's just kind of an odd time to make the announcement.
Yeah, well, unpack this then for us in Texas. If we have higher and more volatile oil prices, that at least potentially can boost revenues for Texas producers, but that might also raise gasoline and diesel costs and perhaps complicate refinery planning on the Gulf Coast, no?
Yeah, so this doesn't really do Texas any good in the short run because, all of that oil production in Abu Dhabi is it's locked up inside the Strait of Hormuz. So, that's one of the oil market's main sources of spare production capacity to help volatile prices. But, unfortunately, it's locked up right now and nobody can get at it. So it's not going to do any good, right now in the short run for prices. But longer term, that additional supply coming on, into the market is going to overall push prices down, right? So probably dampen enthusiasm in Texas for more investment upstream. So this is a signal folks in the shale patch will be looking at in the long term, like, oh, do I want to invest? Well, Abu Dhabi is going to bring an extra 1 million barrels or so to the market once things clear up. And that's not a great sign for future oil prices. That suggests oil prices in the longer run are going to be lower.
If you're a driver in Texas, someone who's used to seeing the prices at the pump go up over the past several weeks, is there the possibility that this could show up at the pump anytime soon? Sounds like no.
No, not really. This is sort of a longer term play. And we got to get the Strait of Hormuz open before we can do anything. So.
Any clues as to, I know you're at a conference in Mexico City right now. Are you hearing any clues on when the strait might actually open up and we might see a resumption, or is everyone still playing that guessing game?
Yeah, nobody knows. I mean, there's this interesting offer from Iran, sort of a less for less. You leave us alone and we'll leave the strait alone. This offer to Trump, sounds like at least an initial step towards reducing, some of the pain to the global economy and oil markets. But Trump's mulling it over. So, let's see what he decides.
As you step back, what do you see this signifying, this move by the UAE? Clearly, they wanted to send some kind of message.
Yeah, I mean, overall, it sort of signals to me that they are kind of casting their lot in a bit more with the U.S. I think they see themselves, chafing a little bit within the Gulf Cooperation Council countries. Those are the 6 Arab Gulf monarchies. They seem to enjoy, or at least see a little bit more future for themselves in having a closer partnership with the United States, which suggests a bit more disarray among the Arab Gulf monarchies, those 6 wealthy oil exporting countries. They kind of come together at times, and then they're it's a bit of a fractious group, and this is showing that when they come under strain, at this point, they seem to be fracturing rather than coming together, which is not a great sign for the region.
Jim Crane is the Diana Tamari Sabak Fellow in Middle East Energy Studies and co-director of the Middle East Energy Roundtable at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Dr. Crane, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us on the Texas Standard.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Monthly Presents The Story, a docuseries about the state of Texas. Stories about our culture and what's at stake, from the perspective of the magazine's writers. Airing weekends on local PBS stations and streaming on the PBS website and app.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Matt Harrop. Another round of severe storms that swept through North Texas yesterday, leaving behind a trail of destruction. A tornado hit west of Dallas in the city of Mineral Wells. Mineral Wells Fire Chief Ryan Dunn says they reacted quickly after a tornado was reported in the area.
There was a report of a tornado warning in the area. We set off the communication center, set off the emergency warning system, try to get people back inside. Shortly after that event, we started receiving numerous 911 calls.
At least 2 people were taken to the hospital with injuries. Several others were treated at the scene, but there were no fatalities. Officials will conduct an assessment this morning to find out how many homes and buildings were damaged. The owners of Camp Mystic are defending their efforts during the deadly 4th of July floods last year. Richard Eastland, the son of camp owner Dick Eastland, says his father was unaware of the danger coming down the river.
When I say my dad was in the dark looking for that information, he couldn't find it because the radar wasn't showing it, the National Weather Service wasn't showing it, and the gauges that were upstream of us on the South Fork were no longer in service.
27 campers and counselors died that night. Lawmakers in Austin held 2 days of hearings as the camp seeks to reopen at another site this summer. A new poll shows Democratic State Representative James Tallarico leading both potential Republican Senate candidates in hypothetical matchups for the general election. Houston Public Media's Andrew Schneider says the poll shows Tallarico with a slightly larger edge against Attorney General Ken Paxton than against Senator John Cornyn.
The Texas Public Opinion Research poll shows Tallarico leading Paxton among likely general election voters by 5 percentage points and Tallarico ahead of Cornyn by 3 points. In both cases, Tallarico's lead is outside the margin of error. The poll shows moderate voters breaking for Tallarico against Paxton or Cornyn by more than 40 percentage points. It also shows independents backing Tallarico against either potential Republican candidate by more than 20 points. Both Cornyn and Paxton draw their strongest support from white, non-college educated, and rural voters. Black, Latino, and college-educated voters all lean toward Tallarico by wide margins. The Cornyn campaign declined a request for comment. The Paxton and Tallarico campaigns haven't commented.
And for the first time since 2017, the Spurs are headed to the Western Conference semifinals after defeating Portland last night, in large part to their star Victor Wembanyama, who suffered a concussion and missed a game and a half in the series.
We learned that we can overcome difficulties mid-game on the fly like that.
The Houston Rockets, meanwhile, are in Los Angeles trying to avoid elimination against the Lakers tonight. I'm Matt Harab in the Texas Newsroom.
Support for these Texas headlines comes from Half Price Books, a Texas-bred new and used bookstore, proudly supporting public media and sustainability by keeping books, music, and other media in circulation. Store locations and more information at hpb.com.
33 minutes past the hour Texas Standard Time. I'm Laura Rice. Texas has been the starting point for a lot of iconic brands. Whataburger, H-E-B, and Buc-ee's are a few modern behemoths that come to mind. But Texas as a place to start a business goes back way further than that. Our commentator W.F. Strong has the story of a man named Connie who forged a global chain from humble beginnings.
Connie was born on Christmas Day in 1887 in San Antonio. That would be San Antonio, New Mexico, which was pretty much a one-horse town compared to San Antonio, Texas back then. As a teenager, Connie worked in his father's general store for $5 a month. In school, he said that he excelled in two subjects, math and Spanish. At home, his mother taught him the power of prayer. His father taught him that there was only one word that would lead to success, and that word was work. In time, he learned that praying hard and working hard needed a third element, dreaming big. During World War I, Connie enlisted and served in France. Sadly, his father died while he was in Paris. It was just a couple of months after Armistice Day. Connie's mother sent him a telegram. Father killed, auto accident, come. Mother. He returned home to a small town that was getting smaller, and his father's businesses were struggling or failing. While overseas, Connie had dreamed of becoming a banker, or maybe even buying a bank. His mother knew he couldn't make that happen in a small, poor town with a dwindling population. She told him to find his own frontier, saying, "If you want to launch big ships, you have to go where the water is deep." Connie found out soon enough that that meant Texas. A great friend of his father's who was dying sent for him and said, "Go to Texas, Connie, and you'll make your fortune there." He would later say it was the single most important bit of advice he had received in his career. Connie had $5,000 from savings and some investors he could count on. He wanted to buy a bank. He went first to Wichita Falls, and he found a bank that was for sale for $75,000. He wired the owner and asked for details, and the owner came back with a higher sale price of $80,000. The oil boom in Texas was pushing prices higher. Connie couldn't meet that new price, and that turned out to be lucky. That bank failed 2 years later. Connie moved on to Fort Worth, where he had no luck, and then he took a train to Cisco, Texas. The town was full of hordes of men seeking their fortune in black gold. Connie couldn't find a bank for sale there either. He decided he'd check into a hotel to collect his thoughts, but he couldn't find a room. In one hotel, he realized the owner was renting rooms for 8 hours at a time. He was collecting on 3 sleep shifts a day. Cleverly working his way into a conversation with the owner, Connie discovered that the man wanted desperately to get out of the hotel business. He wanted to be in oil. Connie asked him why he would want to give up a hotel that makes money hand over fist. He said, "I'm making only thousands a year when I could be making millions in oil." Connie asked him how much he wanted for the hotel, and he said $50,000. After negotiations, Connie got him down to $40,000. But he had only 1 week to close the deal. He had half of it from investors and borrowed the rest from a bank that was happy to lend some of the oil money it was flush with. When Connie signed loan documents with the bank, he signed not with his nickname but with his formal name, Conrad. And his last name you will recognize, Hilton. The Mobley Hotel in Cisco, Texas, was the first Hilton hotel. He said that night he dreamed of Texas wearing a chain of Hilton hotels. That dream came true in a much bigger way than he dreamed that night. Today, Hilton hotels number 9,000 across 143 countries, and it all started in Cisco, Texas. For many years, Conrad Hilton kept a picture of the Waldorf Astoria in New York on his desk. He considered it the finest hotel in the world. He wanted it. In 1949, 30 years after buying the Mobley in Cisco, he bought the Waldorf Astoria on the famed Park Avenue. That evening, he went to St. Patrick's Cathedral to do as his mother had taught him, to pray in gratitude. But he said he didn't pray in thanks for his new hotel. It was in gratitude for living in a country where he had, quote, the all-American right to dream with the actual possibility of seeing that dream come true. I'm W.F. Strong. These are stories from Texas. Some of them are true.
W.F. Strong is a professor of culture and communication at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. You can find more stories from Texas at texasstandard.org or wherever you get your podcasts.
Support for Texas Standard comes from the beef-loving Texans at the Texas Beef Council, a community passionate about what they eat, where it comes from, and how it's prepared. Recipes and meal ideas at beeflovingtexans.com.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. If you live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you likely know the acronym DART. Perhaps you use it frequently. Not just the acronym, but what it stands for. Dallas Area Rapid Transit. Thousands of disabled North Texans count on DART's paratransit services to get around. On Saturday, 3 area cities are set to vote on whether to keep those services. And as KERA's Pablo Arauz-Peña reports, paratransit riders are raising awareness of their need for DART.
In this video posted to her YouTube channel, Frances Zalas is making the trek from a grocery store in Dallas to the First Unitarian Church in University Park. Along the way, she finds an obstacle.
But oh no! What is this? There's no sidewalk! Whatever shall I do?
Zalas is a quad amputee after a medical event 2 years ago. She lost her arms and legs and uses a wheelchair. She filmed this video to show people the challenges of getting around the area in a motorized wheelchair without public transit. Zalas says without DART,
it would definitely be more isolating for me because it would be more challenging for me to be able to get to church.
She's one of thousands of paratransit riders who rely on DART services daily. But after May 2nd, 3 North Texas cities, Addison, Highland Park, and University Park, could lose those services, including bus, rail, and paratransit. Voters there will decide whether to stay in DART or withdraw from the system entirely. The elections could have a regional impact for paratransit riders across North Texas.
It is really important for people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities to use DART paratransit for the future.
Ian Ron lives in Plano and has Down syndrome. He says without those services, he couldn't be independent or hold a job.
I would stay home, have my parents drive me everywhere.
That potential loss of service is what prompted Kevin Wright to begin raising awareness of the need for DART. He lives in Irving and has cerebral palsy, autism, and limited vision. It was his first time getting involved in any kind of local activism.
I emailed my mayor and city council twice, and then I went to the meeting, so I feel very good about that, and hopefully the 3 cities, the voters will make the right choice.
Plano and Irving had called their own withdrawal elections but rescinded them after reaching deals with DART. It was a small victory for residents like Wright. Meanwhile, leaders in Park Cities and Addison are moving ahead with the elections. They say they're not getting their money's worth from DART. That's why they're proposing an alternative rideshare service similar to Uber or Lyft if residents vote to withdraw. Amanda Hartwick is with the city of University Park. She spoke to the city council about an alternative service.
The election would take place in early May. We would canvass the results and then hopefully have a plan in place so that if DART services end, we're able to provide that seamless transition to those riders.
Frances Zala says those proposals are premature.
We don't have enough information on how or if it would improve the current transportation that we already have.
DART paratransit service is not perfect. Zala still has to book any trip a day in advance before 5 p.m., so her mobility is limited. But she's encouraging voters in the 3 cities holding elections to choose to keep DART.
Our goal is just to make sure that they have all the information to make a firm decision.
She just hopes voters will understand the impact the loss could have on the thousands of people who depend on DART. I'm Pablo Arauz Peña in Dallas.
After the success of Artemis II, NASA unveiled its main rocket for next year's Artemis III. The agency has a goal of increasing the frequency of missions and continuing the program for years. And as Houston Public Media's Michael Adkisson reports, NASA is hoping to inspire a new Artemis generation.
After the launch of Artemis II, NASA Associate Administrator Lori Glaze was at the Johnson Space Center, thinking about the future.
I really feel like the exploration that we do is just inspirational for everyone here on Earth, hopefully inspiring our young people around the world, the Artemis generation that's growing up now.
During the Apollo era of the 1960s and 70s, there was the so-called Apollo generation, young people who came of age during the space race. Now, NASA is hoping for an Artemis generation. Between private space exploration companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin and a more diverse workforce, a new generation of space researchers has more access to space exploration than ever before. Carla Perez Garcia is a senior at Clear Horizons Early College High School in Clear Creek ISD.
Since I was really little, I had a fascination with the stars and, the possibility of that there's so much out there that we don't know and how the universe is infinite.
Watching movies like Interstellar inspired her. So did living so close to the Johnson Space Center.
So it's really, really exciting to think that, these are ordinary people who are walking beside us possibly next to our HEB.
Her classmate, junior Aiden Sonny, says living in Houston has shaped his interest in astronomy.
Space became something that I myself became fascinated with. I'm really fortunate enough to get the opportunities that a lot of people aren't able to get, being close to NASA.
Carla and Aiden both competed in a space settlement design competition last month. It's an international competition where high school students design a community in space as if they were living 50 years in the future. Pasadena ISD junior Abraham Guillen also competed.
And I want to be part of that too, to help out the next generation of people. You don't have to be this super smart, rich, or have this genetic or be born in this type of family to make it into the industry. I want to get people more access to it.
As the space industry grows more diverse, it's also growing internationally.
Definitely growing up, the idea was you have to come to America.
Margot Moy is an Australian student studying at Rice University.
As I graduated, Australia started to launch its own space agency and started to get things together, and we're working on projects with NASA, so you don't necessarily have to go to the States.
She's a first-year student in the university's Space Studies graduate program, which collaborates with NASA and the Johnson Space Center. Some of the grad students, like William Rogers, want to go to space.
Every time someone asks me what I want to do and I say I want to be an astronaut, in the back of my head, there's little kid me screaming at the top of his lungs that, hey, I might actually do this, which is amazing.
Others, like Mackenzie Golden,
I know way too much now.
Would rather stay on Earth and support spaceflight.
I can't believe that I'm getting into it at this time and that I'm going to have a chance maybe to put my mark on it. I think in history, this is a turning point we'll always recognize as when we start to treat space differently.
Mauricio Trevino, in his second semester, is already working with a private space exploration company.
I mean, we are the Artemis generation, right? Looking at the Apollo mission and the way that entire program influenced where we are today, and thinking about how Artemis is that for my generation is incredible.
I'm Michael Atkinson in Houston.
You can keep up with Texas Standard at texasstandard.org on social media and wherever you get podcasts. Now you can also find more Texas Standard on YouTube. We're posting our daily show there and special video content, including our recent interview with actor Bob Odenkirk. There's more Texas Standard still ahead, including what regulations experts want to see Texas put on robo-taxis. That's next.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' compensation provider that's been caring for hardworking Texans for over 30 years. More at texasmutual.com/expert partner.
This is the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. As autonomous vehicles, sometimes called robo-taxis, proliferate in major Texas cities, local officials and safety experts are expressing concern about traffic safety. Autonomous vehicles in Austin have passed unloading school buses, blocked emergency vehicles, and even killed a duck near a local park. But robo-taxi operators continue to expand in the capital city, as well as Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio, making Texas a major test bed, even with paying customers aboard. Nicole Cobbler is a reporter for Axios Austin, and she's been covering the growth of robo-taxis in Texas. Nicole, welcome back to the Texas Standard.
Hey, Laura. Nice to talk to you.
Do we know how many autonomous robo-taxis are currently on the streets of Austin and other Texas cities?
Well, there's a lot. I know that at least in Austin, Waymo has about 300 robo-taxis here. This was their latest count that they told me. So, many more than that.
The state does have regulations that applies to robo-taxis. What are they, and are they the only rules that apply?
Yeah, that's right. There's actually some new rules that have gone into effect as of yesterday, and that requires all of these autonomous companies to be, authorized by the Texas DMV. That means that they need to prove that they have things like cameras inside the vehicle, they have a first responder plan, and things like that. And that's the thing, is that Texas state authority really preempts local authority. So local officials in places like Austin don't have much of a say over what goes on with these companies in our town.
You mentioned these brand new rules. Where did those come from?
That was from the Texas legislature, passed this last session. And as of yesterday, all of these AV companies need to be authorized by the DMV.
Okay, so that was just the deadline set when
right.
the legislature made their decision. So you spoke to officials and transportation experts who say we need more rules. What did they tell you specifically ought to be addressed?
Yeah, the big theme was this dynamic safety certification. UT researchers at the Center for Autonomy have been looking into how we can better evaluate these vehicles, for safety, and especially in rare, unpredictable situations. Like in Austin, last month we had this mass shooting. A Waymo robo-taxi blocked an ambulance briefly, and researchers say a dynamic safety check would actually allow us to make a more ongoing effort to see how these cars are performing in unpredictable situations rather than just a one-time certification.
Okay, so the deadline or the new rules from the legislature are one thing that happened this week. Another thing happening this week is a public meeting involving Waymo that officials don't plan to attend. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Right. Yeah, that meeting is a joint committee meeting between Austin City Council's public safety and mobility committees. A few city council members have invited autonomous vehicle companies to come to this public meeting, and they especially want to hear from Waymo in this public setting to discuss this ambulance incident. But Waymo officials say we've had, in the month that's followed, we've had multiple private meetings with city and state officials, including the governor, regarding this incident. And we feel that's the best way to have conversations about this.
What's your sense of the regular people? I mean, they're on the roads with these autonomous vehicles. Some are comfortable enough to take a ride in one. Have you heard from regular folks about what they feel and whether they feel like the rules in place are enough?
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally in Austin, I feel like I hear people are pretty excited about this technology. I have plenty of friends that feel fine and safe in these vehicles and say they seem to perform better than a human driver. Of course, there's certainly concerns, and these incidents, I think, need to be scrutinized and should be publicly scrutinized, like in this public meeting today.
Nicole Cobbler reports on tech, local politics, and more for Axios Austin. We'll have a link to her latest at texasstandard.org. Nicole, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And you're listening to the Texas Standard. And audience and engagement editor Wells Dunbar is in the studio with me now. Wells, things are different here on campus. The students aren't here. Mm-hmm. It's like this end of the
getting a little
kids'
quiet.
School year is coming up. It's weird. It's that changey time of the year.
Changing of the guard, to be sure. And summer right around the corner. In fact, that's what we're talking about this week. Summer camp and safety, the talk of Texas this week. State lawmakers conduct a hearing on the 2025 tragedy at Camp Mystic that claimed the lives of 25 young girls and 2 counselors. And those hearings unfolding on the heels of a lawsuit against the camp seeking to prevent its reopening, those court hearings occurring last week. So combining all this, after the Camp Mystic tragedy, these renewed questions about camp safety and whether families may be thinking differently about it this year. So we're asking Texans, has their view of summer camp changed? Are they more hesitant to send their children away overnight? Or if this is important to them and their families, do you still see it in that light? Yeah. And there's some new context here. It's interesting to me here, Laura. We've been reporting on Texas Health and Human Services and their letter to Camp Mystic. Mm-hmm. They received a notice of deficiency last week as part of their licensing application review. I think it's important to note here that state officials say this isn't unique to just one camp. I reached out to Health and Human Services, and they informed me that all 174 youth camps that had submitted emergency plans as of the end of last week, they also received these similar deficiency notices.
Everybody?
Yeah, everybody across the board. And this is due to new statutory changes and expanded emergency requirements enacted in the aftermath of those deadly floods last year. So, in other words, the state says that camps across Texas are being asked to strengthen and update their preparedness plans, even more so than they are now. And more camps still have applications pending. So that number, 174 camps as denied as of last week, that number could even grow because those are only the camps that have submitted their plans so far. It may sound a little confusing or bureaucratic, but honestly, it translates into practical questions. Who's watching the weather? What's the evacuation plan? How quickly can families be notified? And how prepared is prepared enough, I think, is the toughest question here. Camp Mystic, like all those other camps, have some 45 days to revise their emergency plans. And on our Facebook page, Christina Sean agrees with that. She says that it's as it should be. She notes that back in the 1980s, she worked for a tiny campfire girl camp in East Texas with a trickling creek running through the back camp, and their camp had an emergency plan. There's no excuse for not protecting kids. And Peter Witt accurately notes here that parents send their children to camp with expectations they will be safe and have a good experience. Obviously, those camps near flood zones need to take that safety part seriously. So we're looking to hear from folks if summer camp meant something to you growing up, if it still does, or if you just have some thoughts on this. We really want to hear those thoughts recorded. So go to texasstandard.org/talk and leave us a voice message. We'd love to share your voice with our audience on air.
We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much, Wells. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you back here on Thursday.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Woldridge, Adrian Killam, the George Huntington family, and St. David's Foundation. Additionally, Texas Mutual Insurance Company is a founding sponsor of Texas Standard.